And there are certain roles when we're talking about fiction and mythology, the father figures are necessary. So, you know, I talked about in that video of the metaphorical Oedipal complex in the Superman movie. You know, it's not about literally killing your father, marrying your mother, or whatever, but it's about overcoming the metaphorical father, or surpassing it, or outgrowing, or whatever, so that you can reclaim the metaphorical mother. And I didn't go into specifics so much in that video, but I will here. The basic hero's journey. Okay, so in terms of father figures in myth, you can have the benevolent king or the tyrannical father. Okay, so your father can be a good guy like Jonathan Kent. That would be sort of the benevolent king character, or they can be a tyrannical father. You know, someone that needs to be overcome. And sometimes those archetypes show up not necessarily as fathers. You know, the tyrannical father could be like a system or a villain or something like that that Superman would have to overcome. And the hero, the male hero in a hero's journey, has to overcome the tyrannical father to reclaim the metaphorical mother. Now, metaphorical meaning the feminine. And you think this comes from psychology of growing up. You know, you think of a boy growing up, their mother is their first encounter with femininity in their life. So that compassion, nurturing, life-giving, you know, that kind of energy. And the father's there to care for them too, but it's a different kind. The masculine care is different. It's to train and protect, but the mother's there to nurture, to coddle when it needs to be coddled, and to care for, and stuff like that. So that feminine energy's there. Now, as an individual grows up, they can't just be coddled, right? That's not healthy. They can't just be, you know, still running to their mommy's arms, right? As a young man's growing up, they have a different relationship with the feminine. And so reclaiming the metaphorical mother is often done once they find love, once they find, and what that means is it's basically refining the feminine energy in the new context. Now that they're an adult, now they can have the feminine energy in their life, not as a mother there to coddle them and nurture them and you know, raise them motherly. No, now it's as a wife, ultimately, to in equal terms there, to stand with them, to nurture, to give them that feminine energy, that support and that compassion, but also to receive from them the masculine energy of protection and all of that. So that's the basic psychology of it, and how that plays out in story is often metaphorical. So to overcome the tyrannical father isn't always overcoming a bad guy. You know, sometimes there'll be an actual literal tyrannical father in a story, sometimes there won't. But it does mean learning how to be the father. You're learning how to grow into the father yourself. And that's one thing that Superman in the comics did so beautifully, once again, until Dan DiDio brought in Bendis and they just dumped all over it. But that whole arc of the young Jonathan, you know, they had him and Lois had the son Jonathan, named after his own father. That was a beautiful arc, and we got to see Superman as a father. Bendis thought that wasn't edgy and dark enough, so he had to just totally pull a Zack Snyder on it all the way, and it's been garbage ever since. Not worth reading. But those original, that Superman Rebirth era was beautiful. Beautiful, because you saw Superman with that Clark, with that wonderful example of Jonathan Kent as his own guiding light as a father, grow into that himself. And it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. Fairy tales, for example, all the way back to Grimm fairy tales, but certainly even in Disney's versions of fairy tales. You had think about Cinderella, for example. Now, feminists aren't bright enough, they're not smart enough to figure this out. And I mean that regardless of how intelligent anyone might be. Ideologies dumb you down. They dumb you down to the point where you can't function. You can't really look and see the whole picture because the ideology has put blinders on you. So like a feminist theorist, when she looks at a movie or a story or whatever, all they're looking for is, how is this unfair to women, or how is this, you know, something that should be praised for its treatment of women? That's the only thing they look for. They've consciously dumbed themselves down. And that's the same thing with all of the ideologies out there and the critical theories, surely. They claim that's not the case. They claim it's so much more than that. No, it's not. It's not. It's just not. So, but if you take something like Cinderella and you've got an example of a, you know, where feminist theorists might look at that and say, oh, look at that, disgusting. The mother's not even there. She's dead, of course. And then the mother figure is a horrible, you know, Lady Tremaine there, the evil stepmother. the point behind that, though, is that Cinderella has lost both her real mother, the mothering, nurturing figure, who doesn't reappear until you got the guise of the godmother, the fairy godmother, who comes in and reappears as that energy, you know, in a magical, metaphorical form. But the father, even with Lady Tremaine, and you can get on the father for marrying that horrible woman anyway, but even with Lady Tremaine in the picture, Cinderella was never mistreated as long as the father was alive. So the father, the presence of the father figure, the masculine fatherly presence is protection. And that's what it should be. That's what it should be. So for a lot of classic heroes and classic fairy tales, you know, you've got, for example, look at Hansel and Gretel, where the father, by the behest of the stepmother, I think is the way it usually is, takes the kids out to leave them. I mean, this is a failed father. And because of his failed protecting and failed fatherhood, these children are in this horrible trouble. So Disney movies in general have a long tradition. And then eventually we have great fathers coming in. You know, I see some people in the chat mentioning Geppetto. You know, Geppetto from Pinocchio, certainly trying his best to protect his son, but, you know, the lure of the world is too much for him. As Sound Engraver mentioned, Mufasa. I see Leia Plus Size talking about King Triton. They're not there anymore. They're not in Disney anymore. You know, look at... It's slowly been happening, and slowly but surely happening. Frozen, for example, was just garbage. Frozen was horrible. It had good songs. There were good writing, good animation, you know, portions of it. But the fact that they tried to make Elsa this sympathetic character and this champion of woke ideology. She doesn't need no man. She is just there. It's sisters for themselves and blah, blah, blah. And look at how uninteresting of a character she is then because of that. In the sequel, she takes the exact same journey she did in the first movie. She's emotionally, she's stunted in growth. She cannot grow anymore beyond that need to accept herself, that just need to love herself, that need to realize how amazing she is, how victimized she was by her parents, father included, how victimized she is by the world that doesn't understand her. She had that exact same journey in the second movie. Anna is capable, I mean, she's horribly written, but Anna is capable of growing beyond that a little bit when the writers actually let her, because she has, what's his name, Kristoff in her life. And that doesn't mean that every woman out there needs a man or you're stunted in growth. No, we're talking about stories here and story logic. And because stories are symbols of going out there, and for a woman hero, for example, I've talked about this before, the heroic journey for a female is to tame the masculine energy, to come to terms with it. I talked about Moana and the great example of that, and that there's no love interest between Moana and, I forget his name, but the Rock's character, you know, the demigod. There's no love interest or no love story between them, but she has to sort of tame his masculine energy a little bit, which doesn't mean, and I say tame, that's probably a really misleading word with today's ideologues, because that's all they want to do is tame, castrate, and lord over any man or any masculinity. That's not what I mean. I mean, make the masculine energy take her seriously. This is the Beauty and the Beast story, the beautiful Beauty and the Beast story. Make the masculine energy take her seriously and coexist as separate energies that are equally working together. And we see that something in Beauty and the Beast in the context of a love story, and in something like Moana, you know, even outside of a love story. It's great. It's a beautiful song, beautiful story, rather.